I thought, okay, let's start with a small question. Okay. Can you put God in the conversation? Absolutely. You almost have to, so that you can grow out of uh, the more limiting views of God, and you can continue to let that evolve, all depending on how you perceive and view God. I was listening to a recording on YouTube, and it was between a fella that was talking to a scientist. I believe he was an astrophysicist, and it had a near-death experience. So that kind of totally changes your whole outlook there when you have a near-death experience, because that totally takes you out of your paradigm or your worldview, your idea of what is truth and what is not truth. It just pulls you out of that. You have this other multidimensional experience with infinite unconditional love, and then you're dropped back in. And so that was an interesting thing, because coming from that very strong scientific background, the word God didn't really fit in. Yet, what does he call that experience? We don't really have the languaging to really call it that. And one of the things that I noticed is that when you start talking about God, the conversation goes all depending on how you perceive and view God. So the interviewer and the scientist, were talking about God, but it became obvious that they really didn't have the same perceptions about it. And they really weren't using it the same way, yet the two were using that word. They never really stopped to clarify. So that's where I happened to make a comment section. I opened up a wonderful conversation with someone, because some people use God from an Old Testament point of view. And now that God was angry. And then some people use God from a New Testament point of view, and that God is supposed to be love, although people do a lot of very unloving things in the name of God. Is your perception of God superstitious? Can you barter with your version of God? Is God equally everywhere present? Is God in science? So I think when you start looking at the word God, you have to really take a look at, well, how do you perceive God? Because, for example, some people's version of God, then no, I don't believe in that. Other people's version of God resonates, and it's like, yeah, I get it. Sure, I can work off of that premise. So it really comes down to where you are in your growth spiral. I remember 35 years ago, I had a wonderful teacher, and I was really asking a lot of questions, because my parents' version of God did not align with actual experiences that I had had as a child. Astral traveling and seeing people's energy fields, intuitively sensing what was going on in somebody, feeling their feelings, which is very empath oriented. And so when I shared these things, I asked my mother one time to astral travel with me, because that was my solace in this, what I saw as a very violent world. I would travel to the stars at night because it was just an awful lot of fun. And there was a whole lot more space up there in the stars than there was here on what I saw here on Earth. And it just freaked my mother out, bless her heart. And they ended up, taking me to their minister, who, tried to tell me that that was of the devil. And I learned very quick, well, you can't share about that stuff. Better keep quiet about that. And, being able to see people's energy fields and auras, well, that was of the devil. And, being able to see energy, vibrational energy flowing between people as they talked, well, that was of the devil. So that was kind of the basic of the questions that I asked when I was a young adult, and really trying to reconcile the whole concept of Jesus and my actual experiences. And I had a wonderful teacher who told me, she said, Glenn, practice the presence of God as you see God. practice the presence of God as God being equally everywhere present. Just do that for a week and see what happens. So I said, okay. So I had little sticky notes everywhere. Practice the presence, practice the presence. And what I noticed is that I immediately got calmer in ways that I hadn't even realized that I was not calm. And it was so nice. I said, okay, well, I'm going to practice the presence of God being equally everywhere present for another week. And then what happened is that what came up was I realized that I'd been subconsciously carrying an image that I had scoffed at on a conscious level, but subconsciously it was that image of the God with the long beard, staff, sitting in the clouds. That's kind of that Old Testament God. And I hadn't realized that that was in my own personal collective consciousness. Well, when that came up, I said, well, okay, that doesn't resonate. So I'm going to release that. And I'm going to practice the presence of God being equally everywhere present. And then it was the early days of understanding that as I moved along and God became more of infinite unconditional love, and there was no separation between me and God, that automatically kind of took me down into that journey back to my divine soul knowing, which is what I talk about today in these days. But I wasn't aware of that aspect of me yet back then. But so then I did it for a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth week. And then the famous car accident happened somewhere along that line. And that was where I was in the car exit on snow and did the 360-degree turns. And the equally everywhere present omnipotent voice rose up from within and said, let go. And I did. And that's when I shifted and I saw everything really is, it shimmered divine light. Everything was unconditional love. And I saw firsthand that there really was no separation. And I saw a kind of little doubting Thomas show me the holes from my Christian upbringing, said, yeah, there's only unconditional love. God is equally everywhere present. And in those days, I did Father, Mother, God, because I was trying to reconcile the feminine and masculine. So I was still kind of in that paradigm of separation. And now I understand what those are aspects. So can you put God in the conversation? Absolutely. You almost have to, so that you can grow out of the more limiting views of God, and you can continue to let that evolve. My niece was 2 years old. I looked at her and I said, Spencer, do you know God? And she was like, yes. And I said, well, where is God? And she went, everywhere. Then when she was like maybe 4 or 5, I said, Spencer, do you know God? And she's like, a little hand on her hip. Yes. Well, where is God? And she pointed, she went here. Then when she was like 6 or 7, I said, Spencer, do you know God? And she went, Glenn, yes. And I said, well, where is God? And she goes, oh. So by 7 years, at 2 years old, God was everywhere. At 4, in her heart. At 7, up there. So it was no longer here. So that kind of shows very clearly this process of unlearning or ignoring what we know in our beingness to learn what are the rules of the paradigm that are around us so that we can belong. And the other story, just to reiterate this, I was in Tennessee and I was on a divine soul pilgrimage where I had asked my divine soul what comes next, and it said go to Arkansas. And I was like, Arkansas? What am I going to do in Arkansas? It's like, don't worry about it, just go. It's like, okay, so I'm going to go. Turns out Arkansas was a bed of crystal. And I did not know that. And so as I was there, it shifted me deeper and deeper and deeper. But I was out on the lake and I was with some good old boys. These were, just some good old boys. And they were talking and they were saying, the wildest thing just happened. You're not going to believe it. I'm almost embarrassed to tell it. And one said, what? And he said, well, They had a 3-year-old girl and a brand new baby. And the baby's in the crib, and the little 3-year-old wanted to go in and talk to the baby all alone. And the parents were like really unsure about that. It's like, is it safe to really leave a 3-year-old child with a newborn baby? But their daughter really, really insisted. And I don't remember the name of the kid, so I'm going to make up a name for the baby. But the daughter really, really insisted. So they said, okay, they figured they had the baby monitor. They were outside the door so they could kind of monitor it. It's like, okay. So the little girl runs in there and goes up to her baby sister and says, Sarah, Sarah, this is really important. And you could hear the baby, ha, doing little baby sounds. She goes, what does God look like? I forgot. I know, goosebumps. So she was aware of the fact that she was forgetting. She was aware of the fact that her sister would still know. And even though the sister didn't speak English words, you could hear the sister doing baby gurglings. And then Sarah walked out with a smile. Okay, so what would I tell somebody to help them remember? I would help them remember deep within their being, their divine spark that is consciously connected to everything that ever was, is, and will be, is consciously aware of our connection. I would help them remember, and I remind them to remember. And that's what I call our divine soul knowing, just for want of a word, so I could have a conversation about it. The one thing that you need to remember is that two appearingly conflictual things can always be reconciled if you have a larger point of view. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to recognize in the conversation, is you got to let go of what you think you know up here so that you can allow what you really know to rise up, or at least allow yourself a larger paradigm if you're not ready to take a look at allowing divine inspiration to rise up. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to lay the groundwork on this. So I'm going to speak into it to hopefully kind of help people reconcile these, because it's like you're looking at it through different lenses, but it all makes sense once you really get a larger vision of it. Okay, so the divine architect. I think the first thing you need to do is step outside of maybe any subconscious patterns that you have going on of a God with a long beard and the staff in the sky that I spoke of earlier. And take a look at the symbiotic relationship that we're in with everything. All things were created by something that we're going to call God. Okay, equally everywhere present. So this is the premise that I'm working on. So there's this incredible symbiotic balance between nature, between all things. I mean, you can even look at your body, and there's a symbiotic balance between the molecules and the muscles and the blood and the organs and your emotional world and your mental world. And there's this incredible symbiotic balance. So you can look at even something as simple as your emotional world. When you're angry, everything contracts. When you're happy, everything expands. And that actually affects your muscles. It affects your blood flow. It affects everything. So you can just look at the symbiotic relationship that you have between yourself and yourself. And then the symbiotic relationship that we have with each other, with nature. Then you could take it up on a cosmic scale. So there is this incredible balance between everything. So if something seems out of balance, it is actually in balance with the greater whole. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to take a look at. The other thing that you need to take a look at is the principle of cause and effect. Okay, so this whole cause and effect there's like this ebb and flow that we are all part of. So I can't change the entire cosmos. I'm in the effect of the entire cosmos. I'm in the effect of a flow of people. For example, if you're in a whole mob of people, and the mob starts to go one way, if you to look at it from above, you can see the ebb and flow. If you're down there in it and they're all pushing, it seems chaotic, but you pull back, you see that actual fact, there's a perfect balance that's going on. So I'm maybe in this mob of people, I'm in the effect. So what is my cause? My cause is I'm going to get real still and I'm going to move, not panic about that, but look at where are my spaces that I can move in, so that I've got my own free choice, my own cause and effect within the grander cause and effect. That's happening within a grander cause and effect. That's happening within grander cause and effect. Okay, so if you look at it and everything seems chaotic, if you look at it from another point of view, it's not chaotic. And there's always order within the chaos. This is something that even the scientists on subatomic particle quantum mechanics are discovering. You know, so it really depends on what lens are you looking at it through. You have to look at it through a larger lens. Okay, so that's now the challenge when you look at the grand orchestrated and the chaos. The challenge, the human challenge is that we learn to be afraid of change. Yet another abiding principle is that all of life is always in a constant state of change. I mean, that's a basic principle. So even if something seems at rest, it comes into the rest and then it's moving to another. So it's even in that state of change. Okay, and where we run into it from a human point of view is that we've learned to be afraid of change, because inherent to that is the fear of death. Okay, so we hang on to what we see as our paradigm, what we see as our truth, what we see as our worldview, but it's a construct. And it's a construct that if enough of us agree to act as if it's real, then it becomes very, very concrete. But you can step out of any construct. You know, what is your view? Is it an Old Testament God, you know, with all of this good and evil, and I'm going to punish you? Well, then you're going to see your selective perception is going to interpret it in a certain way. And because of that interpretation, you're going to behave and act on that. You know, and let me just speak real quickly into selective perception so that we're using the same concept here. There's a car accident on the corner. Boom. Okay. And the doctor sees who's hurt. The police see who's at fault. The lawyer sees what's the litigation case. The mother sees a hurt son or daughter, and the little kid sees, wow, it was really cool. Boom, stuff is going everywhere. You know, so it's the same set of facts, but totally different realities that are going on, totally different interpretations. And so the behavior is based on that. You know, so it really depends. And we've come back to what's your concept of God, you know? So let's say you see, we'll go to that crowd again. Okay. So you see people getting trampled. Well, that's the devil in action. You know, somebody else would see it as, oh, well, that's people not helping each other and only thinking for themselves. Other people will see it, well, that's her fault or his fault for being there. Other people will see it as, oh, isn't that a shame? You know, other people, you know, it's like, it's going to get viewed. It depends on what your lens is. And for me, the important thing is to remember is that your lens is just your lens, and that can be changed at any given time. You just, and this is where I love the formula that I work with of stop, look, let love. Stop. You know, if what you're doing isn't bringing you an expansion, isn't bringing you deeper into the concept of what is infinite unconditional love and the power of that, because that's part of who we are. It's more natural and organic to act and move and be in unconditional love than it is to hold the construct of being less than and judgmental. But so to take that lens, you just stop. You take a look at what you're doing and you take that little lens off, let it go, let it go. And then just kind of relax, look into yourself and say, infinite unconditional love, I'm going to let that flow. And as you relax, you'll feel a sense of, relief, release. And in that expansion, you're opening your mind and your heart to understanding what is unconditional love on deeper levels. And the more you do it, and then the more you actually give it and transmit it, the more you understand how very, very powerful it is.